Hi, beautiful, beloved souls. It's Jem again, and this channel, as you know, has commentaries, rarely PowerPoints. And this commentary title is Analyzing C24-UN271. Read the description and I'll put it there. So, analyzing C24-UN271, are cloaked ships truly approaching Earth? NASA, and we all know about NASA, not a straight answer. NASA calls it a comet, a long period visitor from the outer darkness. Ice, dust, rock, nothing more. But what if that label is doing a little too much heavy lifting? Because when we start pulling the data surrounding C-2014 UN271, let me try that again. The Bernardinelli, Bernstein, and I'll put that in the comments, in the description. Bernardinelli, Bernstein, comet, something doesn't quite sit still. Tiny inconsistencies, subtle anomalies, like static in a signal that should be clean. And here's the question that pulls us in. Are we looking at a natural object or something hiding behind one? Part 1 is the data anomaly. Let's begin with what we know. C/UN271 is one of the largest comets ever detected, drifting in from the far reaches beyond the known planetary neighborhood. Objects like this are expected to follow predictable paths, governed by gravity, inertia, and time. But in recent observation windows, astronomers have noted something curious. Small deviations, not dramatic course changes, nothing Hollywood would latch onto, but enough to raise an eyebrow. Because comets don't usually adjust, they respond. Outgassing can nudge them slightly, yes, but those movements tend to follow very specific measurable patterns. Here, the shifts appear inconsistent, almost like micro corrections. Now, to be clear, there are natural explanations. There always are. Uneven sublimation, hidden jets of gas, irregular mass distribution. But when multiple small anomalies cluster together, they stop feeling like noise and start forming a pattern. Part 2 is spectral contradictions. Now, let's talk about light, because light doesn't lie easily. When astronomers analyze a comet, they look at its spectral signature. This tells us what it's made of: water ice, carbon compounds, and dust. That's the expected cocktail. But some readings linked to objects like C-UN271 have sparked quiet conversations, because within the expected icy signatures, there appears to be irregular reflections, sharper, more defined, almost like light bouncing off something, less porous, less chaotic, more structured. Now again, let's stay grounded. There are known phenomena that can create unusual reflections: crystalline ice structures, dense rock inclusions. But here's where the mind begins to stretch. If something were intentionally cloaked, what would it look like? It wouldn't announce itself. It would blend. It would mimic. It would wear the mask of something we already expect to see, like a comet. Part 3 is sensory interference and the interbelt. As this object moves closer towards the inner regions of the solar system, something else begins to happen: interference. Subtle disruptions in observational data across different systems. Now, space is noisy, signals degrade, equipment has limits. But when multiple observatories experience irregularities, so something irregular, while tracking the same object, it raises a different kind of question. Is the noise coming from our instruments or from the object itself? Because interference implies interaction, and interaction implies presence, not necessarily intelligence, but something more than passive rock. Some have speculated that high-frequency emissions, even naturally occurring ones, could distort readings. Others push the idea further. If a cloaking mechanism existed, it wouldn't just hide visually, it would disrupt detection. It would blur the lines between object and background, between signal and silence. Part 4, the cloaking theory and thermal discrepancies. Now, we arrive at the most speculative layer, but also the most intriguing: temperature. Comets behave in predictable thermal ways as they approach the sun. They heat up. They release gas. They brighten. But what if an object didn't follow that script perfectly? What if certain regions appeared cooler or more stable than expected? In theory, a cloaked structure would need to regulate heat, manage exposure, control its thermal footprint. And if that were happening, even imperfectly, it might show up as subtle inconsistencies, not proof, but fingerprints. And this is where the conversation splits again. One side sees natural complexity. The other sees intentional masking. Part 5. Physical arrival or psychological harvest. Let's zoom out. Because whether this is a comet or something more, there's another layer worth considering. Why now? Why does every anomaly, every unexplained signal, every strange data point arrive in an era where humanity is hyper-aware, hyper-connected, and constantly searching? Is this a physical approach or something more abstract? A psychological harvest where the real interaction isn't happening in space, but in perception, in curiosity, in the way we interpret the unknown. Because sometimes the most powerful influence is not what arrives, but what we believe might be arriving. In closing, grounding, and my channeling perspective. Now, let's ground this properly. At this stage, there is no confirmed evidence that C/UN271 is anything other than a comet. Everything we've explored sits on the edge of interpretation, anomaly, and possibility. And that's important because curiosity without grounding becomes belief too quickly. What I will do, though, is something different. I'll later channel on this and see what comes through. I did channel about previous objects that were new, like 3I Atlas, and I have difficulty in pronunciation. Uma, you know the one I'm talking about, and also Boris, whatever that one was, and the Boris one I channeled was normal, whatever. I channeled was an old probe, and 3I Atlas I channeled was a cloaked ship by reptilians. So I'll later channel about this comet and I'll see what comes through. But let me be very clear, as I always am. Channeling is not 100% accurate. In fact, even structured remote viewing sits around 65% under strict conditions. So, anything intuitive must be approached with caution, understanding that filtering and personal bias in the mind occurs. And I'll have to be really honest. Until this commentary, I have no direct knowledge of C/UN271. As I said, I did previously channel about 3i Atlas, which presented itself as a cloaked craft. So I'll return possibly later today with an answer with my channeling, and I'll sit with what comes and I'll see what emerges. Until then, we're left with this question. Are we watching a comet pass by or something watching us back? Thank you, beautiful, beloved souls. I want to know what you think. Do you think, and I'll just put it here so you can see what it looks like, C24 UN271 is a comet, or do you think it's a cloaked ship, or do you think it's something else? Please, if you do drop a comment, do so with respect and be kind to your fellow human. Please take care of yourselves. Love, light, and blessings. And you'll see me later with an update on what I channel. And just to let you know, I'm putting out as many videos as I can today because tomorrow I will have an appointment with the dentist. I hate the dentist. All right. Love, light, and blessings. Bye.